You are muted.
And now our next presenter can begin sharing using the share content button.
Yeah, Eric, are you ready? Give you a little introduction. Hey, that looks good. Eric Risner is an aviation geospatial practice lead at Woolpart. He has more than 2 decades of geospatial project management experience. Eric actually helped to develop the FAA guidelines on the use of GIS and has written CAD and GIS standards for numerous airports. Eric's presentation is going to go over how the Dayton International Airport uses GIS and some of the unique tools created for the airport. So, Eric, you're up.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Are you out there? You wanna kind of give a brief overview from your perspective?
Yeah. So, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you all for inviting us to present what we're doing here at the airport. We've been working with Woolpart and Eric for quite some time, developing the system from the ground up over the various past years. We use the system for airfield asset management, working with Cityworks. So we'll go over with you today exactly how it fits in. We use GIS on the airport, and the advantages and how we've been able to develop some synergies with Cityworks and our asset management program. So with that, I'm going to set this up and send it back to you, Eric.
All right. Thank you, Mike, very much. So as Mike said, we've been working with the airport for quite some time. We did develop CAD and GIS standards for them probably back around 2008, 2009 sometime. I do really feel that standards are kind of the framework that sets everything up. So I think that's an important piece of it. But for the airport, we like to think of the airport as just kind of a little city, and so they've got a lot of different components that they're trying to plug in, and GIS is just one piece of that puzzle that they're trying to plug everything in. Whether they're dealing with airspace and obstructions, as Mike said, we're using it heavily on the operations side with the Cityworks, the work order management system, but you can property management, they can use it with their airport layout plan drawings. And so there's a lot of different components that are all utilizing GIS at the airport, and we're using GIS to bring a lot of these things together. So this is an example of the GIS Viewer. Not doing any live demos here today. I've got struggle with VPN access here personally into the airport, but this is just an example of their GIS Viewer. This was a custom developed application. This was really before ArcGIS Online was in place. It is something that we would like to do here in the future, is get them updated and moved in to ArcGIS Online. But this was kind of a custom developed application with some different components to it. They could go in and kind of turn on and off their features. This mimicked the FAA's data standards that we talked about. The FAA does have a GIS schema in place for airfield features that they'd like to see followed, and so this does follow that process. And we also developed some tools or some widgets in here that help the airport manage some different components. There's what we call a Part 77 analysis tool. So basically what that is, if you've got a temporary crane or if you've got something being constructed in and around the airport, it could penetrate the imaginary surfaces that the aircraft fly at. And so the airport has to manage those components when they're being constructed or when a temporary crane is put up. And so this tool that we developed will take into consideration the location that they pick on a map. It'll take into consideration the height, and it'll analyze whether it's going to be a penetration to those surfaces or be close to those surfaces, so that the airport can kind of manage those potential obstacles. So like I said, just a couple different tools that we developed with that. And then if you go out to the Dayton International Airport's website, they actually have what we call the LUDOP Portal. So this was a land use development portal that was basically put online for the airport to help with incoming businesses, to help them see what properties are available. You can see the different areas that are available. You can see the different utilities that are specifically available to those sites. And it was to help them incorporate and bring in businesses into these areas that they have for potential development. And I know they've done a great job of getting some new businesses out there over the last several years. So hats off to Mike and his team on that. So moving from the GIS component into more of an asset management. We chose Cityworks because Cityworks ties very well to a GIS. And I think every GIS professional out there can kind of relate to this. Not all your friends really know what you're doing. A lot of our clients think we're pushing the easy button, but some days it does feel like we're beating our heads on the table. And so, there are a lot of different components that go into tying the GIS to the asset management, but I'd like to share what we've done at Dayton that's helped kind of streamline their processes and help make things a little more efficient on their operations and reporting side of things. So when we first sat down and talked to Dayton about this, we wanted to make sure that they were utilizing their GIS data. And so we had developed the GIS Viewer, but it wasn't necessarily getting used on a daily basis. So we wanted to incorporate it in a way that it was getting used on a daily basis. We wanted to make sure that they were keeping their GIS data up to date. It's easy as things change, and a lot of changes happen at an airport. It's easy as things change to not keep them updated. You're getting CAD as-built deliverables in a lot of instances, and it's not necessarily tying back to your GIS. So how do you keep those things updated short of your internal staff taking it on? And that's a challenge when you've got a limited staff capability to take on some of those challenges. We wanted to replace their current Part 139 inspection process. I know that may be language that not everybody understands, but a Part 139 inspection is a twice daily inspection a commercial airport has to do, where they're looking at lights that are out, they're looking at pavement issues, they're looking for fallen object debris out on a runway could pop in aircraft's tires. So these are the inspection processes that they go through, and they've got to have a really strong reporting component to those processes because the FAA comes on site and does an annual inspection every year as a part of that. They wanted to track cost of maintenance. What's the cost of escorting? They've got a lot of individuals out there that they escort out onto the airfield, whether that's a contractor or a consultant. But to be able to track those types of components, they wanted to track the air show costs, wanted to better incorporate preventative maintenance routines, and wanted to track equipment inventory of materials. And so when I talk about equipment and inventory of materials in Cityworks, you can have a non-spatial component to a truck or a lawnmower or a snowplow, and you can have it as a database entry, and you can still track order management processes through Cityworks just by having those features in your GIS database. So the enhancements with the Cityworks system, by doing everything through an automated platform where they're out with a tablet and they're inspecting an object, they're using the tablet's GPS location, selecting the asset like a light, they're saying an airfield light is out, and then it's automatically sending an email to their electricians and notifying them of the outage. The electricians will go out and make the repair, and that repair, once it's completed, it'll send it back to the operations team so that they can inspect it and ensure that there's not an issue. It streamlined the process from having that automated email sending and receiving. It also allowed them to take pictures and attach things to objects. So if they weren't communicating well with each other, you could take a picture and say, this is the issue, you've got to take a look at this. So it really helped them streamline making sure the repairs are being done and also what the status of the current repair was. They've got a live map that they can go into at any point in time and see all of the active work orders out on the airfield and why they're currently on hold, whether they're waiting for a part or what that may be. Gave them access to weather information, also helped integrate some of the wildlife management. You've got a bird strike out on the airfield where you've got a plane that impacts a bird. You do have to report those strikes. And so helping maintain those things in Cityworks and being able to report those things back to the FAA was an important component. Whether you've got deer out on the runway, could be another issue, or it could be any of a number of wildlife type issues. It also automated their inspection report. So what we did was they used to have a checklist item of about 30 to 40 things that they had to inspect, and they had to check off as satisfactory. And so what we did was we automated that inspection for them so that if they completed a work order on those items, then it would automatically that inspection report is unsatisfactory. And if they didn't complete a work order on any items, it would automatically check it off as satisfactory. So it's auto creating that inspection report for them so that they didn't have to go through that process. And then the NOTA manager, you know, it is a notice to airmen is what that is. And so if you've got things out on the airfield, like you've got construction, you want to notify incoming pilots of that construction. You want to keep track of those. If you've got surveyors out on the airfield, some of those types of components. And so we created a process with them that allowed them to manage those things in Cityworks. And also they've got to be able to report those things back to the FAA. So the Part 139 inspection process, I kind of mentioned it a second ago, but they will go out and inspect something. If there is a corrective maintenance issue, they'll file a work order. It goes to a repair state. Before you close the work order, there's actually an inspection state, and then this all will generate a type of report. And so, you know, what this did was it gave Dayton a better process overall for completing work orders, but it's also now giving them a history of their work orders. They can start to see these things on the map. And I think I've got a slide coming up that'll kind of show one of those types of things. So this is an example of the GIS data just within the Cityworks environment. This is a picture of a map from the tablet that they would use out on the airfield. So you can kind of see the airfield lights out there. You can see the airfield signs if you know the different symbology, but you can see the wrenches of the different work orders. And this was just an example of some of the work orders that we can show. I can tell you they don't have that many outstanding work orders out there. They do a pretty good job of cleaning them up. And Mike, from my understanding, you guys had a perfect airfield inspection process this year when the FAA came on site. So that's great for you guys.
It went really well. And Cityworks played a great big part in convincing our inspector that we were on top of it.
Yeah, I do know last year there were a couple issues on the inspection report. I think mostly around the fallen object debris. It's not that Dayton wasn't picking up the fallen object debris. They certainly were, but they didn't track necessarily where they picked them up. And that was kind of a concern for the inspector. And so I know this year they changed that process so that they are recording a GPS location with the tablet when they're picking up that fallen object debris. But that's also helped them see where they're having a lot of fallen object debris issues. And then they can start to analyze what's the root cause behind those fallen object debris and what's the driving force behind that. It could be was a bad piece of pavement. A lot of the concrete panels out there are 25 by 25 foot sections, and you may have some deteriorating corners or something like that. But being able to analyze and find those types of issues is some of the things that Cityworks has been able to help with as well. So as I said, they are creating the work orders out in the field with a tablet. You know, a simple process, a lot of domain fields where they're just picking what those issues are. So we're setting up a lot of the different types of damaged or missing issues that it could be, why it could be inoperative, some of those types of components. They can take a picture, and then it's submitted directly to maintenance directly from the airfield. They do have a cellular tablet that's out on the airfield. I know when we first started this, Wi-Fi was pretty good on the airfield, but there were a couple areas that Wi-Fi was a little bit of an issue. You can work in Cityworks in a disconnected mode. You'd have to have a downloaded map, but you can work in a disconnected and sync it back once you get back to the office. But we did really want them kind of having the live capabilities, so they're working with a cellular tablet out in the airfield. Skipped one. So this is an example of what a Part 139 report would look like. So when I mentioned earlier the satisfactory and unsatisfactory items, you'll see a work order number that goes beside it. And then down at the bottom, you can see the work orders that were open specifically during that shift. We do have a second page now, something that the FAA requested so that they see work orders that weren't open during the shift, but are still open from previous issues, and what's the reason for those work orders still being on hold. Like I said, it could be a part that they're waiting for, or it may be a non-critical issue that they just haven't gotten to yet. So this was the report that's auto-generated by them creating those work orders on those automatic on those inspections that they do, normally a daily and a nightly inspection each day. So I mentioned the benefits of syncing the work orders to the GIS. So this is an example of a heat map where you can see where they're having a lot of work order issues. So when you see some of the areas here that are the darker, you can see they've had a lot of work orders in these particular issues. And then they can start to decide, you know, why are we having a lot of particular issues in this particular area? And they can start to look at even the assets. You know, I mentioned earlier that they could put in a truck, for example, into the database. So if you've got a truck that you're spending a ton of work orders on, spending a ton of money on, you can start to look at, is it better to repair and continue to repair this truck or to replace it? You could do the same thing with sections of pavement out on the airfield. You could do the same thing with a section of lights or a circuit of lights. And by having that information and starting to track that work order history, you can really start to tie these components together. I will say one of the challenges with this is, as we've updated the GIS over the years, having a surveying and mapping background, a lot of times we like to map new. We don't like to fix old data. But in this case, it's not better to map new data, because we've got to keep track of those unique IDs to keep the work orders attached. Cityworks really attaches to the unique IDs coming from Esri to keep those synced and to keep those together. So if we replace the unique IDs, we're starting to lose that work order history. And that was something we wanted to make sure we didn't want to do even this year as we updated Dayton's airport layout plan. So there were a lot of GIS features that were updated this year, but we wanted to make sure that we kept those unique ID locations in place, and making sure that we just kept everything tied together. So this was one of the key components for us as well. With moving to Cityworks. You know, Cityworks is a work order management system that you can bring into asset management, and it can help you keep track of a lot of different repair issues. But we also wanted it to keep track of GIS updates that were necessary. So when they've got airfield operations people out on the airfield doing inspections twice daily every day, and things have changed out on the airfield, they're able to actually now see something on the map that looks incorrect, and they're able to create a work order for a GIS update so that it goes back to the Dayton team. And if they want to manage those updates themselves, they could, or if they want to pass those along to us for them, we can certainly update those GIS procedures or update those GIS features. So it's a great way of having eyes on the airfield twice daily, every day, really kind of manage your GIS, look at your GIS data, and make sure that as things are being updated, as things are being changed, that it's getting incorporated and updated back into the GIS. So with that, I'll kind of open it up here for questions if anybody has any questions.
I have a question. What was obviously GIS is a very iterative process, and when you have somebody who's developing the product versus the end users themselves, what kind of an iterative process did you have with the airport to make sure that you were meeting the end user needs?
We were working very closely with the airport throughout this entire process, working very closely with the operations department specifically. But there were different needs, right? So when you look at the operations department, you know, they needed airfield lights, airfield signs, pavement, fencing. They needed security and what the FAA would call safety critical related items. But when you look at the LUDOP portal that we showed at the beginning, you know, underground utilities aren't necessarily a part of that. But for a potential developer coming in, knowing what underground utilities are available to their particular tract or their particular parcel that they're buying was important to them. So it was coordination with a lot of different departments. And that's one of the things with working with an airport and working with a county or a city. You know, if you can get that cross-departmental relationship going where you're talking to those different departments and you're understanding what the end user needs are from each department, because they are definitely not the same.
I might also add that it's also very evolutionary. As we move forward with working in one area, like our Part 139 inspections, and seeing the success there, we can identify and do identify where this would really work well for stormwater management, for instance. So we're continuing to evolve our system.
Yeah, it's been very airside focused to date. I do think, you know, we've talked to Dayton about intentions of taking it both internal to facilities maintenance and to landside maintenance for parking and other types of features. And like Mike said, there's a lot of different use cases for it. So it can be very evolutionary. You can certainly start growing it out to different departments as you start to progress.
And we did have a question from Mike Lucas. Is a similar system used at Dayton Wright Brothers KMGY in Springboro? Is that info also incorporated in the city aviation data?
I do know that we have the city aviation, or we have aviation data available in the GIS, in our GIS system for the Wright Brothers Airport, but they are not required necessarily to do the Part 139 management because they don't have the commercial service. So we don't have the Cityworks in process at the Dayton Wright Brothers Airport.
And just from my own personal curiosity, I know that, for example, gas utilities don't really want to share their information. So how does the airport just use the utility information for planning purposes, and then of course always contact 811 before they dig? Or is that live linked to DP&L or whatever the Vectren gas utility up here?
So we use we go with the first. We use it for planning purposes. We do coordinate very closely with the utilities on where stuff runs through the airfield. We do have here in Dayton and also down at Dayton Wright Brothers main high pressure gas mains that run through the airfield. So it's really is in everyone's best interest that we know exactly where those are. Also, as we're always call before you dig. Always call before you dig.
Thank you very much. Do we have any additional questions from our chat group? All right, I don't see any additional questions. Do you have any anything else you want to let us know about, Eric or Mike?
I'd say thank you guys for having us, and look forward to some of the other presentations here today.
Likewise, thank you for letting us be a part of this.
Well, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We got a lot of people saying thank you and great presentation in the chat comments. So this was really well received.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to take, I think, just a couple of minutes here to get prepared for our 11 o'clock presentation. And I got to figure out the technology, but we'll be putting up a little slide that says, you know, go visit the map gallery and swogis.org. So I'll try and get that queued up here while we are getting the next presenter ready to go. Jen, it's not me, is it?
Whoa.
Andrew, looks like we've got you next if you want to queue up your slides, or if you are out getting a drink of water, we can take care of it in a minute. Also be sure to check out the chat. We do have the SWOGIS map gallery and video gallery links in the chat itself. And you can also get there by going to www.swogis.org and heading over to the presentations and video gallery.
Kelly, does the record function seem to be working? Okay.